Happy release day, Propagandhi fans. This is Greg, and you are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. This is, of course, a very special episode that I am delighted to bring you. Today is May 2nd, 2025, the release day of Propagandhi's long-awaited 8th studio LP, At Peace, from Epitaph Records. By now, you have almost certainly heard the record, and have thoughts, opinions, and observations. I am personally delighted by the record. I was fortunate enough to get it a little bit in advance of the release, and when I turned it on, I was so surprised. So much is new about the songs on this release, from the noticeable tempo shifts to lyrical content to almost genre bending as well. I have committed a significant portion of my life for the last 5 years to talking about this band's music, so to hear something this new from the band feels like a massive gift. After today's Empire's Tomorrow's Ashes, I was really surprised by Potemkin City Limits, which included songs like Fixed Frequencies, Life at Disconnect, and my personal favorite, Cut Into the Earth. So here's my little take on release day. I was more surprised by this record than I was when Potemkin City Limits came out. I bet a lot of people were expecting a certain sound when the lead single for At Peace came out, and I bet a lot of you are surprised by the diverse new approaches the band took on this record after hearing the whole thing. I can't wait to hear what you think. It is such a gift to share this time with all of you as we soak up the moment of a new Propagandhi record 2,772 days after Victory Lap's release. To celebrate, I invited a few important people involved in this record onto the podcast to talk about its creation. John Paul Peters from Private Ear Recording in Winnipeg, Chris Hanna from Propagandhi, and Jason Livermore from The Blasting Room are all here on this episode. JP tracked drums with Jord, bass and some guitars with Todd, and vocals with Todd at Private Ear. Chris recorded guitars and vocals at home, and Jason mixed and mastered the record in Colorado. You will hear some of their memories of those times in each of these 3 interviews in that order. Timestamps in the show notes are available, so you know where each interview begins and ends. I am also including my previously released interview clips from parts of my conversations about writing with Todd from August of 2023 and Jord from August of 2024, because their comments about writing and recording the album from those conversations are relevant as well. But if you would like to hear those full episodes, please go back and find those episodes themselves. Since those are previously released, they are at the very end of this episode after Jason's comments on mixing and mastering. Thank you so much to Chris and Todd for helping me get access to the record, Jasmine at Epitaph's publicity department, John Paul Peters and Jason Livermore for everything leading up to the record's release and for allowing me to play a small part in all of it to document these stories on this episode. Please enjoy my conversations with John Paul Peters, Chris Hanna, and Jason Livermore. In spite of endless war, restriction level advance, depredation and plague. John Paul Peters, welcome back to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Hi there. Great to be here.
JP, I'm so glad that you're here. The last time you were here was when we chatted for Negretto and the recording that you did for Failed States and Victory Lap. And I'm so delighted that our paths need to cross again for the podcast and for documenting the story of Propagandhi that we do here on the podcast. So just as a reminder for everybody out there, if they haven't heard you, the first time you were here for Negretto, and I really appreciated it because we've kind of kept in touch over the last couple years, and I like our little friendship. You know, it means a lot to me.
Cycling and cats, music.
Yes, absolutely. And you also were on a conversation with me on Witch Police Radio last summer in Winnipeg, where we talked a little bit more broadly about your work in the Winnipeg music scene. So that's a really cool one as well. But JP, we're here because Propagandhi has gotten together and recorded a new record, At Peace, coming out the day this episode comes out. We're obviously recording it in advance, but if you're hearing this on May 2nd, 2025, happy At Peace release day. JP, take me back to the beginning of this process. I know you started working with Propagandhi again in about May of 2024 for a DOA cover on the DOA tribute record. Tell me about getting back in the swing of things with Propagandhi last spring.
Yeah, so that was that was just a fun, quick day in the studio where the guys were like, "Kate, we're doing a cover song. We're gonna come in uh with none of our stuff. Like, we'll bring some guitars and we'll just whatever's there, we'll just have some fun." So that was kind of the MO for the day. And there was not a lot of curation on like guitar tones or like which drums. We just cobbled some stuff together, and the guys recorded basically live off the floor, which was
Mm,
super cool because obviously for the main albums what that we've done, we've it's been a fairly like carefully scheduled, carefully curated, like logical approach with multi-tracking, and isolating and stuff like that. This one was like set the guitar amps in the booths and let's go. So that was a lot of fun actually. I was kind of surprised.
very cool. That actually is awesome. It kind of sounds more like an Agassi approach, if you will.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
Man,
I think the vocals were tracked like right after. So not necessarily live vocal, but I believe we did a scratch at the time. But I mean, I do a lot of live sessions, and it's really fun to do that with Propaganda.
nice. Because I'd imagine that was the only time you've ever done that with them like that, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Other than any other demoing kind of stuff or like, scratch playthroughs. Yeah, for sure.
Very cool. Um, when did they start talking to you about the new record that they were putting together and getting on the books for that?
I think that was, yeah, around the same time. Yeah, they basically called, booked with my studio manager, my wife Vanessa, and I was like, okay, we're on, we're doing this. So then there was, um, there was not a lot of pre-production on this record, and I know you're gonna probably ask me about that more, but like not a ton of pre-production from my perspective. More of I started going to their jam space and we started really looking at equipment and talking about process. Um, Chris was already doing, he'd done most of the scratch tracks and demoing of the songs
Mm.
before the
When did
record.
when did you start hearing the material?
Literally on day one of the album.
Really? So
Yep.
so you went in totally fresh. Is that a new process compared to the failed states and victory lap processes?
Yeah, both of those records I had a pretty good idea of where things were at. For Victory Lap, we um what the band would do there is record their jams and get the song to like, hey, here's a really good presentation that feels really good as far as a live performance. And then I would take those and I would put them into Pro Tools and I would map out tempos because they weren't recording two tempos. So there's some very interesting and substantial like tempo deviations that were happening. Like I think we did there was one track that had somewhere close to 30 tempo changes.
Hmm.
Which when you listen to the record, it doesn't seem like that. Like it wasn't with the intent of having all these tempo changes, but kind of my job was to like they wanted to be able to practice to a grid um that would kind of formalize the song, and that would also like inform how the scratch tracking would get put together. But yeah, like there was so what I do is I use like elastic time in Pro Tools, and I feel like I listen to a section, I try to come up with how do they fit together? How do they feel? What's the intent? And then I would kind of work on this thing, and then I would present it to Chris, and they would practice to it. And we'd make a few tweaks and go from there. So that record I had like a really good idea of the material. On this one, they wanted to do less changes. So I think, yeah, overall, there's a lot less tempo changes in the songs, and Chris pretty much managed that stuff. So for me, it was like it was like my birthday. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, here's what this song sounds like. So it's interesting. I mean, I love being more involved, but every situation requires something else. And in this case, I was like kind of presented with this nugget, this treat every time we started a new track.
Nice. Did they tell you anything in advance about how like the vibe of this record was going to be compared to past records? Because people listening to it, when it first comes out, especially me listening to it when it first came out, I was like, this is a totally new arena for this band. Were they telling you anything about how it would be, new territory for them as a band before you were recording it all?
To be honest, not a lot,
I mean, I'm
which is
just so
which is really
fascinated by
interesting.
that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
do you get the same impression from me? Like when I put it on, I was shocked the first time. I was completely shocked. Were you shocked as well when you started hearing the songs coming through the performances?
Yeah, I think so. Do tell though. I want to hear your perspective there.
Okay, so obviously there's no spoilers here because this is coming out the day the record is out. So every song is now available for listeners. But when I got the watermarked copy of the record and I put it on, I had the lyrics and I had the songs on the website. And I listened to it the first time through without any lyrics, and I just let the music and the presentation wash over me. And the first thing that jumps out to me is the massive reduction in the reliance on speed for the songs. Like the record is so much more varied with speed and tempo in general compared to all their past records. The next thing I noticed is Todd's vocal delivery way smoother, silkier, really nice and palatable throughout the record. I can tell he's worked super hard on that. And then also the drums sound completely different than any other past records. Um, Jord told me a little bit about that, but the sound of the recording feels different. The songs themselves feel extremely different. So that it took me a while. I've listened to it probably 20 times all the way through at this point, and now I absolutely love it. But it was like one of those things where I was like, whoa, this is brand new territory for this band. So it was really surprising for me.
Yeah, I would say it was in many ways it was similar for me. Um, I mean, so I'm listening to it through and I'm like, how is this? Where is it all going? Like
Hmm.
as a producer, I really want to know that stuff in advance. But I'm working with a band that curates things in different ways at different times, the way they want to do it. So for me, I was kind of like you. I was like, this is really, really different. And like I'm basically along for the ride. And obviously there's a song on the record called Wild Ride. And that's what I was kind of on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really big surprise for me, as a listener of this band who's followed them basically my entire adult life. I'm so delighted that the sounds that came through and the songs that came through are completely original to me as a listener of the band because it gives me something new to sink my teeth into instead of retreading the same tires that they've done in the past, which is great. But I also imagine that for casual listeners, something brand new when you're expecting one thing it throws people for a loop. And I just hope that people, do what I did and listen to it 10 or 20 times in a row. Um, and like really sink their teeth into it because I feel like they've earned that at this point in their career. But, people will do what they're going to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think it's like, do you want to just do the exact same thing? Those records, those wonderful records have been made, and like they need to do what's inspiring to them right now. And for people that, want another supporting cast, like it's not that. So
Yeah.
that's okay. Like to me, that's okay. I'm a lifelong fan of the band as well, like from the early demos back in like
Yeah.
92. And so like, I mean, we time changes us and there's new elements of like just kind of fatigue with where the world's at. It's like, wow, it's hard to make a difference. Like, can I find my inner peace in this, in this place that we're in? And I mean, I think, we'd have all sorts of discussions outside of like the recording time and just I've been feeling too, just so tired with when I think about, and I'm overconsumed on the state of the world and the state of North America and all this stuff, and it's so hard to like get out of that and just try to find peace.
Hmm.
And so the first single, like to me, it literally resonates with my heart. So it's amazing to be part of a presentation that just captures kind of the feelings that myself, my family have in so many ways.
Yeah, and I live in Buffalo, so the border is a couple of miles for me. And so these types of things that you're referring to um, are hitting me big time as well, and it's leading me to feel frustration and anger and despair and just hopelessness with regards to our society in general. So I get it. Like that's why I'm so down with the tone of this record. And I was thinking back to the earliest days of this podcast when we were talking about songs from like Potemkin City Limits, which I consider to be another really experimental Propagandhi record. The songs like Cut into the Earth, Life at Disconnect, um, Fixed Frequencies, stuff like that. I see this record as a continuation of songs like those. You know what I mean? With the slower tempos and the really exploratory nature of those songs. And I am so happy because in the past I've said, you know what, I really could see Propagandhi returning to songs like Cut into the Earth or Fixed Frequencies in the future as a style because it's super impressive and super experimental and very progressive in the musical compositions, but it's also a little slower on like older joints, you know what I mean? So I love that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, let's chat a little bit more about the way this record was made because this was not a normal record. Jord told me a while back that you all recorded this in sort of an unorthodox way, where you had a chunk of time in August and a chunk of time in October, and there was like 3 days in the middle of the week with long weekends on either side where you were booking other bands in some gaps in the calendar. Tell me a little bit about the story of just the tracking of this because I know there were multiple sessions and I'm just curious about your version of that story.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how it went down. I think, summer for us was already looking like quite busy, and the bookings, we didn't book that far in advance for the actual sessions. But one of the main things that we were discussing was just like we wanted there to be space between the like basically divided into two blocks so that Jord didn't have to like go 8 days straight. And there was also some of the tracks that the band wanted to return to do some more tweaking and some more kind of work on. So it enabled them to kind of like buckle down for six. I think we did six the first time around, and then on the second set, come back and be fresh and nail off a bunch more. So yeah, it was like to me, I do love like on an album, if as much as possible to like be 100% in the game for like a block and then get it done. But at the same time, it was fun to do it this way too. And it gave some relaxed time in between. Um, After the August sessions, which I think we actually started late July, but
Hmm.
we were well on the way with Todd's songs as far as getting all the guitars and vocals kind of done for those. And what it kind of did is it like you were talking about Todd's like smooth vocal tone and different kind of approaches to that, and it allowed him to have a little bit of time. So we kind of did like first round on the two tracks, and it gave him some time to like to think and absorb. And we actually came back and like retracked some of the vocals, and he was able to kind of like push it a little bit farther in the direction that he wanted. And so the benefit of like not being okay, here's the door. When that shuts, it's done. Um, I think that was really effective for that
Mm,
process. And also
excellent.
like the band is they're Chris is very competent like producer engineer, and so like they could easily, he tracked his guitars and vocals and most of the vocals at home. So it was like he was able to like, punch in a line on a song for Todd later on, as things adapted. So when I listen to the final mixes, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a couple lines that they probably were thinking about and were like, hey, we can tweak this or that. And I think that's an awesome process, and it's a process that people should use when they feel, confident and competent with their tools, right? And I just try to tell everybody, like, learn how to record, use your tools. You can do this stuff. You don't have to spend the rest of your life regretting, one vocal line that you don't like the presentation of. It's super
Mm-hmm.
important.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what songs were tracked in session one?
Okay, I'm just looking at my list here.
Because this is super interesting to me. I like this like extremely, banal minutia in a way, because that's what we do here. We do banal minutia. So
All
we got
right.
the
So
July, August session.
now I'm going to preface this by saying that I have uh when I got the final record, which was about a month ago, month and a half,
Hmm.
I'm not 100% convinced that all of these are final titles. So I'll just say the titles that I know. And that's
Sure.
always been kind of a laugh working with these guys, is that, like, you know, there's so many working titles going on, and then it comes out later. I mean, this happens all the time in production where
Yeah.
the song changes even during mix, and then it's like, oh, can you make some revisions to can you like bring the snare up on that fill on such and such a song? And I'm like, I have no idea what song you're talking about because it's no longer the working title. Anyways, here they
Yeah.
are: Benito,
Hmm.
Lost Cat Guy, Guiding Light, At Peace, Courtesy Flush, and Rage Quit.
Okay, so Rage Quit and Courtesy Flush are not songs on the record. So that's really fascinating to me. I'm curious what those were and what they became. Rage Quit. I love it. Courtesy
Yeah,
Flush.
yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. I may have to hit up Chris for a couple of questions that I can put in the interlude between you and him and your interviews on this episode. So stay tuned for more information on that. I think that's really great.
Yeah,
But
love it. It's
okay,
it's gonna be
so
another birthday present for me when I open it up, right?
so that's a great first batch. Benito, what a song. Very very shocking song for me in general. But what I want to know is about Jord's drum situation, because when Jord was here last summer after batch 1 was recorded, he mentioned that he was recording with small cymbals, wooden hoop AOT drums, and the lack of cymbals really comes through. Like the cymbal variation in this recording compared to past records is massive. It's a little bit of a culture shock for the listener, if you will. Tell me a little bit about the difference in the drums for this record compared to past records.
Yeah, I think, well, the AOD kit was actually one of Jord's kits that he had used in the past for some live stuff, but then it had basically been shelved for a long time. And the idea was basically, like, as he's been dealing with some elements of tinnitus, which are fairly substantial, he was on a drive to, like, turn down the volume, right? So how do we do that? Well, let's use like slightly softer sounding drums, um, the AOT wood hoops, etc., lighter sticks, and smaller cymbals that don't, hang around and display as long. And when like, one of the questions I asked him early on in the process, I was like, why don't you just practice on an E kit? But that's a deal breaker for him. So he does not like that route. He wants to feel the real acoustic drums. And, like, so in that way, well, he's wearing, like, ear protection inside of ear protection.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, they have a time limit on how long he can play before it affects, his basically ability to sleep and just feel good. So all this that was one of the other reasons, obviously, dividing up these two sessions was, like, we could do, like, kind of 3 days of, you know, 5 hours a day on drums, and I can spend the rest of the day, like, comping, editing. We can go through stuff. We can start working on other things, but, like, to give George some, like, well-needed space for his ears.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main thing. So yeah, what do you get with the smaller cymbals? Well, they don't ring as long. You don't get that wash in the same way, which, like, pluses or minuses, right? This was like, well, if we're doing a record, we have to be able to do it in a way that feels comfortable. So it's not always, like, the ultimate sonic decision, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like it's not my favorite cymbal choice, but it does just create a slightly different sound. And on that way, it does highlight the actual things that are going on. It doesn't get muddied up. So yeah, like I mean, sometimes we just have to do things that are the best for the moment. I'm going to get behind that, right? Like I'm not
Yeah.
going to be, oh my God, you're using like two A's now. You're just not going to sound powerful on the snare. Like I've recorded lots of drummers. Well, I shouldn't say lots. There's a few select people that end up playing, they're almost tapping. And I'm not talking about rock drummers necessarily, but it's amazing how monstrous you can make something sound when consistency is involved. And that's what I was going to mention. Like Jord, his his drumming ability is very high and his consistency is very high. So it's not like, okay, now your rim shots are totally compromised. You turn up the preamps a little bit, you saturate a little bit more. You just kind of, and I think I still feel the power in the drum performance. Like it's his animation and all that is coming through, right? I mean, we have to think like a lot of drums now, it's, people are programming half of it or recording the drum set in like three different layers, kick drum, snare, toms, cymbals all separately, and then sampling it all still. Well, these are like Jason added like slight amount of sampling in behind, but it's like pretty much the real, like if I when I load up my cleaned sessions at the end, it's pretty much what it sounds like.
Hmm.
So I think his drumming really came across on the record, and
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that.
Well, the thing that I like the most about the lower cymbals is that there's tons of Propagandhi records that have tons of cymbals, right? Those sounds exist on other records, and this is brand new to me. And the thing that I really like about the lesser cymbal presence is how much more space it gives the vocals, especially Todd. Like, there's no competition between sounds with cymbal wash and vocals on this record. Like the vocals on this record are so crystal clear with regards to comparing it to past records. Like I really am enjoying that aspect of the more space by the reduction of cymbals. Does that resonate with you as well?
Yep, I think for sure. I mean, one of the things we did, we used a different microphone on this record. Like obviously, like I know what we used. I believe we used a 47, Neumann 47, made by Wonder Audio on the last two albums.
Mm-hmm.
And on Victory Lap, I believe, yeah, we had a vintage U47 and we had the Wonder 47, and that one won that shootout. So we were going for like a little bit more of a mid forward kind of approach on Chris's vocals. And the mic we used here was a 67. And also I just love Wonder Audio, so I have a Wonder Audio U67. We tried a couple of different mics, but we settled on that one. What I like about it is it's a little bit less mid forward. In other words, it's a little bit less crisp and metallic sounding and a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more detailed up top. And I always think of records like even the most recent Johnny Cash stuff done acoustic, where you can just really hear the personality of the person singing
Mm-hmm.
without it just highlighting the aggression or the punch. And I'm like, I think that's really important here to capture, like, because Chris has harmonics that we didn't hear on the early records because there was a lot of like more tight throat singing, and
Mm-hmm.
he's more like open now, and obviously like a more a more stressed voice box over time, but it allows those details to come through, and I feel like it has a real emotional impact.
Yeah, I agree. Um, Tell me a little bit about the bass that you did on the record. What are we running here? What do you remember about the bass rig and setup?
Yeah, okay, bass rig. We obviously we had a solid DI, and then we ran Todd's SVT Classic through his 810. We tried a couple different cabs, but it's instantly like, oh yeah, that is what Todd is used to playing, right? So that's basically his live rig. And then I have a third channel which I used, I think, a little orange Dark Terror, which is just a little micro head, and I use that through a guitar cab to give a little bit of crunch and a little bit of crisp kind of to the details. And then I was also running a fourth channel which was a Dark Glass Alpha Omega Photon preamp that is kind of it's a really good, like, it's a versatile device that I can use to kind of fill in some holes. So yeah, we basically have a presentation of the DI, the SVT, and the kind of guitar amp, which doesn't have a lot of bass, and then the Alpha Omega. So it gives kind of a palette. I'm all about palettes when it comes to like capturing sounds. Like I well, I shouldn't say I always use multiple mics on guitars, but for heavier music, I'm probably running at least four mics, and I do like to keep those tracks with the intention of the mixer, whether that's myself or someone else, having the ability to do some like without EQing, just choose the different palette from those different mics and blend them together. So it's
Gotcha.
kind of like painting. It's like, here you go, Jason. Here's these four tracks, and here's how I've kind of like pre-blended them. Take it from there. You can mute one of them, not use one of them. And with the DI, the what I always do is get something that's like there's no compression on that DI track. It's super clean. If anything needs to get changed or altered or reamped or whatever, we can, that can easily be done at any
Okay,
point in
so
the process. And I will say we blew Todd's SVT during the first bass sessions. Um, it just the biasing went off and the tubes were the whole bias section of the amp died, and we ended up trying to quickly get it out for repairs. Um, so we had to jump to a different amp. We ended up, plugging in a V4. So it's a little stressful. So I was using an Ampeg V4, which is like a 6L6 version of that amp as opposed to the bigger SVT. And it didn't have quite the same weight, but it was good in its own way. At any rate, we, signed off on it, recorded I think two tracks with it, but then in the final reamping sessions, we went back and reamped like once his SVT had been repaired.
mm, okay.
Yeah.
So so that's session one. I want to know about session two a little bit as well. And I got a couple other questions about Todd, but we'll get to those in a second. So tell me about session two in October.
Yeah, session two. I mean, that one was basically kind of, we did a few punch-ins and things like that on the first tracks. Now, I will say like the guitar process was interesting on here because I would say that half of my time working on the tracks was working on Chris's guitar. So Chris would track at home and
Hmm.
he would give me everything he tracked and I would choose the things. And one of the things that he found really challenging was like not having David Gillis in the band, the Beeve, for that second track is he was like now faced with making decisions on what the other guitar would be. And that was new territory in a way. Like, so he really had to, he would often have like three or four or five different ideas for certain parts. Like, not so much in lead bits, but just in harmonic rhythm, tracks, the stuff that makes the song come to life as opposed to just duplicating your rhythms. But
Right.
it was a whole new realm of like, oh my God, I have to like make these decisions. So I would get he'd record like, so let's say for Todd's tracks, he'd record the second guitar at home. Todd would record here, and then I would comp Chris's parts, and I'd have to listen through absolutely everything, which as an engineer, that's not like, it's actually not time effective because when I'm tracking a guitar, I'm like highlighting, oh, I love that. And then, oh, here. And I've already like pre-compiled all my options, but here I'm getting the blank slate of like all the takes. And, sometimes I would miss stuff, but also like my brain is going to sleep after 10 takes.
Yeah.
But, and so that those were challenges for me that I had to overcome, was just to like really focus. So I had my assistant Katie Pescatelli help out with some of the comping to get some initial vibes, and then I would take it from there because I was still trying to get a bunch of Todd's vocals tracked and getting bass done and stuff. So there was a lot of stuff. We pretty much kept it to the two of us. But yeah, like a lot of decisions in parts and going, I'd present it to Chris and he would be like, "Are you sure about this?" And I'm like, "Partially sure. I mean, I like this for these reasons." And so that's I would say, as far as guitar goes, yes, I wasn't hitting record on them for the most part, but my creative process was that bounce back of like, what's the best course of action for that second guitar? To to bring something interesting to it, but not make it too like, yeah, too out there. Like it has to support the song. And I really think the band was focused on that. But yeah, lots of challenges with the creativity on that second guitar.
Scary. That really is nerve-wracking. I know that well, Chris mentioned whenever I chatted with him, which listeners will hear in just a little bit, he found the whole process pretty stressful as well. So I know that it was kind of an anxious feeling for him as well. So thank you for telling me about that version of events because it sounded just a lot, a lot. Okay,
Yeah.
so did Todd do guitar also? I think Todd played some guitar, right?
Yeah, you bet. Todd played guitar on all of his tracks, which I think were 5 tracks.
Cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
So and then Chris would play a second guitar. So
Okay.
Chris would there, there were challenges there too, because Todd's writing style and Chris's is actually very, very different in the way they formulate riffs and things like that. So a downside to the guitar is getting tracked at home. And, Chris can tell you why he tracked the guitars at home. It's interesting to me as kind of like that's how we're doing it. So I'm an observer, but also I'm like, okay, here's our deal. We're gonna take it from there, right?
Hmm.
So sometimes those riffs wouldn't be matchy matchy. And there'd be like these little things that are different. And then those things add to the stress because then retracks are in order. And, I'm used to like turning up guitar one and going, oh, yeah, okay, we need to just tweak these notes here. And then we move on, we get that part and go. So this kind of added a layer between everything. So then I'd have this big spreadsheet of like, here's things we need to, take a look at because I'm not comfortable with this, and then man, in the process, just with that amount of material, like to listen through and, limited time to do it, I would miss things too, and I'm like, okay, I didn't, I'm very good at looking at waveforms and going like, okay, these are exactly the same, but there'd be like a different note on one of the takes that I maybe didn't catch. And then it created a whole like Chris was like, well, but you didn't listen to everything. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I thought I did. Because- but being one of the 200 million ADHD members of society, it's an ask.
Yeah. Oh
And
boy.
I'm not
Okay.
perfect.
Well, okay, let's talk about October. So the band does some stuff in July and August. They finish up these batch of songs and then they come back. Is that how it went?
Yeah, so we had like initial, I would say in the first session we had Todd's both Todd's tracks, bass for all them, drums all comped, Chris's initial comp on tracks, and then he was working on vocals in that time in between.
Okay.
Okay, that was the first session. And then in the second session was basically comping like crazy vocals. So I comped all the vocals, um, and presented them and went through them, etc. And then the first guitars, there were some recomps, tracking of second guitars, recomping all those guitars, tracking bass and drums for the second batch of songs, tracking all of Todd's vocals, and then, you know, retracking guitar one bits and things like that. And then doing a whole bunch of harmonies, which we probably did about 75% in studio. We were like really pushing the end of the session at that point. So they were able to do some more of that stuff at their place, at Chris's studio. And then obviously lots of reamping and then leads and specialty stuff that we did. And the reamp was the way the whole thing was done is we had to curate kind of a guitar DI setup that was like, okay, for sure this is the way to do it. And for people that don't know, when you're DIing guitar to reamp, there's layers of separation between the performance, the initial performance, and then how that electronically is creating like the sound when it comes around. So when you're DIing, you can't just go like, I'm going to get exactly the same sound I'm hearing right now because the impedances change even with different DIs and different processes. And as we discovered with different cable lengths and all sorts of things. So I'll just kind of jumping back to session one of the goals was curate a guitar DI setup that Chris is 100% confident on that he can just move ahead and track guitars. All right.
Hmm.
So we put that together in the studio. We try a bunch of options. I think we settled on a Neve Portico 2 channel strip for the DI. We were also auditioning like an FM9 box. There was we were trying Avalon preamps for the DI, and each one of them changes the tonal cast that comes back to the amp just slightly, but the Portico felt like the most familiar to Chris. And so we put together this, okay, you're good to go, right? So he took it to his home studio, and while I'm like tracking Todd, I get a text and it's like something's wrong with the DI. It doesn't sound right. Like, can you come down and check it out? So I'm like, jump in the car, drive over to Chris's place, and we're looking at this, and it does not sound the same. And it sounds like there's a blanket over the tone, and
Hmm.
we're like, what the hell? So we package it up, we bring it back to Privateer, and we're testing it here, and there's no blanket. It's fine. And we can A/B the tracks. And obviously, like if it's like tracking with your tone halfway down on the guitar. You're not going to get the performance. The harmonics are not coming through. Like, what could be going on, right? And what we established after like 2 hours of stress was that the cable that he was using at home was causing and it wasn't a malfunctioning cable. It was a good quality cable, but the
Wow.
guitar patch was causing the tone loss. And
Wow.
of any band that I've ever had to like kind of find these little minutiae that absolutely would not have been a minutia at all. Like it would have been a deal breaker. We would have had to retrack all the guitars. Like it would have been crazy. So that's a big deal, right? Now you've spent like 150 hours tracking guitars or whatever time he needed, and now you have to redo it. Like it's unimaginable. And that's a lot
Wow.
of energy, right?
Oh
So
my God.
so, back on Victory Lap, we were discovering different speaker cables, like amp to speaker, were causing like substantial differences in tone. Not necessarily, deal breakers, but like, no, that particular cable, it sounds like a little bit like this, and the other one sounds like, we had to make all these decisions, right? So with this DI process, man, he ended up just taking the cable that we were using at the studio here, which wasn't like some $600 cable. It was like probably an $80 high quality gold connectored Amphenol cable. But the biggest thing is the cable length. So he had a 15 that he was tracking at home, and and we were using a 10-foot at the studio, and that literally made the difference. And I mean, I often run a 20-foot cable into a pedal board that has like 15 pedals on it, and then into amps, and I'm just like, whatever, sounds great. But now now you're like 10-foot cable to the DI, and it's totally not going to work. Or sorry, the 15.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Crazy.
And I believe that has to do with it. There's different things going on in the bounce back of impedance between a guitar and a DI versus a guitar um and the amp if you're dealing with the amp directly. So it's like all these things, you got to get them right. Otherwise, you're just going to waste a ton of time. So we were able to figure that out and move on. But that was one of those like moments where it's like, okay, everything is now like heightened in its kind of stress level.
What's terrifying because Chris had an arm injury as well that he was dealing with
Yep.
and leading up to surgery. So there's a significant time crunch on things having to be done. Otherwise, the lead guitar player who wrote all the songs being tracked can't play guitar for months, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Scary. Um, okay, let's talk about session two. Tell me about October.
Yeah. So again, the dialing in the next batch of songs. So what I had to do was basically we wanted to keep the drums exactly the same. And I'm like I do records like all different ways. Sometimes there's different drums on every song or whatever. But for a record like this, like we had a pretty intensive setup on Jord's kit. So what I did at the end of August is documented it super carefully. All the hardware, I run signals through each piece of gear, make sure we're getting the same levels back, take photos of everything, and then basically like I left striking tape on the floor for like a month and a half in between
Sweet.
sessions. Like so every room mic had its place, we could get back, and that wasn't, it all can be done. It just takes like the decision, okay, we're going to recall this exactly. So we left Jord's drums at the studio. We left the same heads on them. We boxed them up, and then we basically unpacked them, set them up, and tracked the second batch of songs. And I don't even think we changed the tom heads. I think they were just sounding awesome. So there was not much to do. And you know, it was also kind of in this process, I have often in the past had a drum tech. Um, I like having drum techs because then you know, I can just say make it a little bit more like this, and then I can work on other stuff. But my go-to drum tech was not available for this session, and I'm like, well, we're just gonna do it. We're just gonna own that ourselves. And George's like, you good? I'm like, yep. So
Nice. What's these songs that you did in October?
okay, let's look at session 2 here.
And I'll see if I can. I have the track list in front of me too, so I'll see if I have to
Yeah.
do any point out any notes.
So Fire Season, God of Avarice, Vampires, Prototype, and I don't know if it's called Palette Cleanser.
No,
I don't
Prototype and
think it
Palette
is.
Cleanser are not on the record.
Okay,
Um,
Prototype is the really different one with kind of the loops.
Stargazing.
Yeah,
Is it?
Stargazing, that's it.
It sounds like 80s, almost like 80s rock. Like,
Yeah, you bet. That's the one.
okay. Man, what a song. That song shocked me beyond belief. That's like, to me, you know, every record, like the last record, the standout outlier was Lower Order, with the clean guitars,
Yeah.
about the animal industrial uh industry. Um, this one is the massive sonic outlier on this record. Did that one surprise you when it started getting put down on tape?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. For this one, Chris had a bunch of pre-programming as far as like some of the percussion um and other sonic elements. So that one was more of a replacement kind of procedure where we recorded real drums for it, and then we did do you know, I don't think we've ever looped drums on a song before, but this one had a certain amount of looping of certain parts
Hmm.
just to give it that little bit more mesmerizing kind of 80s feel.
Yeah, man. And another one that's really so Chris has two songs on this record that shocked me beyond belief. Um, Stargazing and the closer, Someone Needs to Die, but maybe not you. I think that's what it's called off the top of my head. Really slow, really like it's a very intense build, but it's a very slow song. So that one, the closer and Stargazing were both complete shocks to me when I listened to it the first several times through.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely. And but you know, I love that also you have those moments on the record where it's like, oh yeah, like Cat Guy, or like you're just there's this familiarity, and then there's creativity that plays around. And yeah, I hope people love it. I it's so funny. I still am listening to it as an early listener. Like I
Yeah.
feel like you know, every time I hear it, I feel like, oh my God, I finished this record, you know, 2 months ago, and I feel like I haven't actually absorbed it yet, even though I've heard everything on it 6 million times.
Yeah, man, and there's a couple of Chris vocal lines on the record that I cannot stop thinking about. Um, Whenever he's singing the last song and he does the creation don't make no trash line,
Yeah.
oh my God. And then the other crazy one is in Vampires Are Real. Um, when he snarls, it's like a venom snarl. It's like other times we disappear. And I was like, whoa. Those two particular Chris moments are unbelievable to me. Completely amazing, shocking, surprising, attention grabbing, brand new for me. I was blown away at those two particular Chris vocal moments on the record.
Oh, and comedic. Like I'm hit by the impact of those lyrics, but then I also want to burst out laughing.
Yeah.
You know, and I come from a very like from a conservative Christian like upbringing as a child. And these things are like, I would say I was quite sauced for the first half of my life. I was in the sauce. And I say that in just like creation don't make no trash, but look at it. Like it's
Yeah.
just
Oh, man, I'm glad that you're still processing everything as a fan and as a listener yourself, even though you freaking made the record. You're like, you know what I mean? Like,
I helped make the record.
It's awesome. I mean, it's awesome. Yes. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, so okay, so everything's done, right? October, everything's done. You all start sending stuff down to Jason at the blasting room. Tell me about that process of getting everything in order, finalized, so that it can be shipped off to the next stage.
Well, I would say that was actually still October. So we were kind of on this push to like get all those guitars, comped, and then the big door closer is the reamp time, right? So I think it was about a day and a half of reamping where we were curating the tones. So this is where like, these slightly different kind of, I don't know, I would call them like almost less aggressive, kind of old school, like very, I don't know, I love like different guitar tones than they've done before, but that's where those got kind of finalized and curated. I really enjoy that process. That's, we basically have all the cabinet options set up in the main studio, and we have our speaker cables through the wall, and we're choosing our heads in here and also pedals and things like that. So we basically lock in our main rhythms, and that's, you know, there's certain things that blend. You don't just necessarily duplicate the same thing. So the right and left channel, those are different guitar rigs. And again, we're thinking of like in the past, we'd have David Gillis on the one side, Chris on the other. And, David was an 800, like a Marshall 800 player with pretty much just an 800 with a boost, I believe. And then Chris, at least on Victory Lap, he used a Friedman. So we still kind of used that same head, but with some different speaker options. And it's amazing how like changing up some of those things. I think we were using Celestion greenbacks on this, as opposed to like the more V30 sound that I believe we were using on Victory Lap.
Hmm.
Those little things really change kind of the like sonic palette of those guitar tones. And then guitar 2, we actually used a little plug for Fuzzrocious pedals. We used a pedal called the Lil Fella for the rhythm guitar tone, which is basically like Fuzzrocious's idea of an OCD pedal. A little bit of well, a little bit of a fuzz pedal, but it can be focused with with a Maxon 808 or something, going in, or a tube screamer going into it, or like I love the Rev tilt boost, which has like a cut of the low end to really bring those amps alive. So yeah, we're basically, once we established those, then I think we did a third track on a few things, but for the most part, it was a simple like left right guitar setup. And what I love about that is just how much personality that comes through. It's not just a wall of sound. It's like, yeah, you can make it sound heavier. You can just like scoop out the mids, the low mids, and just kind of like push it into your ears and be like, hey, we're doing aggression here. But here you get like all the nuances, all the little things, and also like lower gain tones, possibly than they've ever recorded with before.
Yeah. Yeah, the lower gain tone. Chris has been talking about that a little bit on his Patreon. So if anybody out there listening is curious about Chris's commentary, a little bit more on low gain, there's been a little bit of commentary on some Q&A he's been doing on Patreon too, which is cool. Oh, earlier, right when we started, you mentioned a song called "The Wild Ride," correct?
Yeah.
I
So
think
that's
that I think that's called actually. I think it's called "Prismatic Spray," and then in parentheses the Tinder date.
yeah, that
Where
would
it's
make sense.
almost like Metallica, Black Sabbath, kind of like kind of like guitar riffs like that.
Yeah,
Um,
Todd song, right?
no, it's a Chris song.
Okay, Wild Ride was a Todd song.
Ooh, interesting. Is that
We'll
there's
have
no
to we'll have
longer
to brief
young.
on some of these working titles. Here, I'll
Oh, it's
play it for you.
so funny.
Oh, here, I got to turn my original sound for musicians on, which apparently wasn't on.
Oh, weird. Oh, I hear myself.
So I was sounding okay even with that setting off. I set it up before the Zoom session. I love that it just turns itself off. Thank you very much, Zoom.
Oh,
All
it
right, here
sounds
we go.
great, by the way.
Oh, do you hear it now?
Yeah.
People cross here in the night.
Yep. Okay, cool. People cross here in the night. I think that is Day by Day.
It should be second last.
Yeah, day by day.
Yeah. There we
Okay, so
go.
turn back that setting so that I don't hear myself coming through your speakers.
Boom, fixed.
Okay, sweet. Um, so JP, are there any uh really cool like little moments or memories or happy accidents or anything like that that happened during the record that are kind of standout moments for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say like I mean, one of the big things for me was just really feeling like Todd's confidence in the studio. Um, in the past, he'd had some negative experiences in the studio where he felt like maybe there was a real time limitation. It's like, hey, just get in there and get this done or whatever. And it caused some traumas of just so he felt like if he went into the studio, like he was gonna screw stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
And this is our third record that we've done together. And I feel like he can confidently just do his thing. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's like, that feels so great. And I think that comfort level with each of the band members, doing their thing and knowing that I'm on their team and that we're focused. To me, that's like obviously less of a happy accident, but like I would say other than happy accidents would be some of the tones that we were getting on the guitars. Um, Fortunately, the DI thing wasn't a happy accident.
Mm.
Uh, there were some new fills that were done. Like Jord really curates his fills super carefully, and that's something that like I've always appreciated. And for any like prop fans that know the band, like it's not just a 16th note snare fill before the start of the chorus or whatever. Like he won't do that. If that was coming up, it might be like an hour or two where Jord's going to be like, I got to get something else, something better. And, then we're off for like 2 hours spitballing ideas of, where, well, we've done that one would work here, but like, how about something like this? So those are really enjoyable for me because those are each like a micro problem. And I'd say, I mean, he's got 98% of it down like pre-studio, but there's a couple of those, it could be whatever moments that end up like being a lot of fun to try to like pick from the 7 options or
Yeah.
whatever.
Well,
Another major, okay, we had a great chat one day where I, so, okay, going back to like 1996,
mm-hmm.
there was a basement show on McMillan Avenue here in Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a discussion that kind of broke out where there was like two sides to this. Like there was, there were definitely some like religious people at the show, but like the prop guys were there. My band was there. My band wasn't actually like I was in a metal band called Officer Down, and
Mm-hmm.
we were more of like a social justice focus. But at the time, like we were pretty much all like ascribing to Christianity, and
Mm-hmm.
there's this discussion of like I don't know, the meaning of life or the existence of God or whatever, like spilled out onto the front lawn.
Mm.
And I was like, Chris and I were like looking straight at each other. And he was like, if I had an elf or like a green elf on my shoulder and told you it existed, like you can't tell me it doesn't exist. In saying like, how can you tell me that God exists, right? And at the time, like I aspired to a prop. I was in a punk band. I'm like, I wanted to, here's like my local hero,
Yeah.
and we're having this like ridiculous discussion on the lawn, but at the same time, like a pivotal discussion. Do you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
think I'm right, and he thinks he's right, and so we chatted about it for the first time since then, and we had this great discussion. And I said like I wanted to thank you guys for sticking to your guns on things and for like arguably being one little part of my like unconversion
Mm.
and unalignment, I would say, to those religious structures that like I I was very skeptical of, like even as a young punker, but still kind of like had the locked in belief system from my upbringing. And I just I just really appreciated that they've always presented something that made me think right from the start, but also like that I had now kind of come to some different, over decades, come to different conclusions, and just that they were a little part of that. And they thought that was like really funny and
Hey,
like
Chris
surprising.
Chris was probably like, "What are you talking about?" Did he remember that?
Um, Vaguely, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where you're like, did that really happen? Like, were we like arguing about the existence of God? Like, how ridiculous. But at the same
Yeah.
time, like, it isn't ridiculous because when those kind of perspectives are formalized structurally and they become religions, and then religions do certain things and can be incredibly damaging, like they are important. It's not just about, the belief. It's about how the system is co-opted and, well, and designed
Yeah.
for different
Well, and
purposes.
what's so crazy too is if I think about my college years, when I was having a lot of conversations like that, like 2002, 2003, I was at a bunch of parties hanging out with like tons and tons of people that if somebody came to me today in 2025 and was like, "Hey, remember that party we went to at the University of Missouri in 2003 where we talked about XYZ?" And I'd be like, "What are you talking about?" You know what I mean? So some conversations that are so pivotal to some people just get lost in the shuffle for other people, but those moments are so important for somebody else's life that to be reminded of that is always really amazing to me whenever something like that happens for me. Like I've had people come up to like friends of mine who remind me of something that like we did in like Europe in like 2004 and I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And then it just opens up this amazing well of memories. You know what I mean? To kind of reclaim those moments from time.
Yep, and memories, but also like remembering that dialogue is like so very important. Like,
Yeah.
even with people that have incredibly different opinions, and it seems to be getting like harder and harder for these. It's like, well, if you don't agree with what someone posted, then you're either the troll or you're just going to pull away from that and stick with your little community. And that's the beautiful thing about the how the punk scene has always, at least ideally, has presented a certain amount of like the ability to have opinions, but also obviously it's always going to be curated a little bit.
Hmm.
But like, yeah, we just need to keep, I was in a dialogue yesterday where I'm like, man, there's this troll is like calling everybody who thinks one thing like a stupid moron. And I just
Yeah.
said, like, there's actually educated people on both sides of this. So instead of calling them stupid morons, let's like bring the stuff to the table and discuss it. And there was no interest in that, and it was it ended up just being a bot, actually, which I fairly sure it was. And it's it's
Man.
it's unfortunate. And I'm like, but this wasn't a bot situation on Macmillan. This was like real opinions, and the desire to like to find answers to
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, and the fact that you've gone on to have this decade plus long relationship with the band at this point across 3 records and seeing their progression and then thinking back to those earliest interactions with them in the 90s, how special is that, you know? It's like that's meaning of life stuff in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. There's some great memories from back then. I don't know if you ever want to ask Chris about the Coke can, but I don't know if they'll bring that up.
Is it involving nudity at shows?
It is. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I've heard those stories. That's good
it's great.
stuff. JP, very cool. Very cool. Thank you for telling me so much detail about the creation of At Peace. The record now being out for listeners, even though we're recording in advance. Um, Very special to have the story of the production and the creation of the record with all the little nuanced gear details. It's kind of like an oral history of the record. That's kind of what I'm hoping to bring to listeners with regards to that. Is there any other detail that's in your mind that you haven't said that you feel like you absolutely must put on the record before we bring this in for a landing?
I think we're pretty good.
Amazing. Well, John Paul Peters, Private Ear Recording, Winnipeg, Manitoba. Thank you so much for hanging out with me again to chat about working with my favorite band in the world. Means a whole lot that you're here, and my best to Vanessa as well. So thank you so much for rejoining me for the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, sir. Thanks for having me on, and it's always great to chat with you.
Chris, welcome back to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Thanks, Greg. Nice hat.
Thank you very much. We are wearing matching hats of the Toronto Maple Leafs out there for folks who can't see us because we're obviously in an audio format here. But Chris, it's great to have you back on the podcast. It's been since November of 2022 when we collaborated on a 9-song discussion over A Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality. So it's nice to have you back after a little gap. Much has transpired in those days. Tell everybody out there what you got going on lately in Propagandhi world.
Well, we made a new record, and it'll be out, or it's out now, and and yeah, we'll see what the fallout from that is.
Fabulous. Well, it's called At Peace, and people listening, that's obviously we're recording this before the record comes out, but this will be out on the release day of May 2nd, 2025. I'm really excited to do this episode with you. Before this conversation, people heard from J.P. Peters, who worked on the record in Winnipeg. And then after this, people are going to hear from Jason Livermore, who mixed and mastered the record in Colorado. So I have you sandwiched in between sort of a production and creation episode of the record that I'm looking at. And since you did so much of the recording yourself, that's where I wanted to have this conversation with you so we can kind of tell the linear story of the record.
Okay.
So I want to hear about before you go to your house for recording. Tell me a little bit about your experience in the studio with Jord, Todd, and JP. Tell me what's going on before you do guitars and vocals at home. What was your experience like?
My experience in the studio was primarily during drum tracking. And at that point, you're kind of there just enjoying. You're trying to just enjoy the moment because you're not actively stressing about recording yourself. In my case, Jordan and I collaboratively decide on tempos, and I generally create tempo maps that he plays to in the studio, and then we collectively sit there and sort of, I guess, examine and approve approaches to the drum recording. And then once Jord gets going, we just sort of we sit back and enjoy his playing, and that's kind of the most relaxing part of the process, perhaps, from my perspective. So that was basically my time in the studio.
Okay. Were you involved in Todd's bass tracking at all in the studio too?
I think when he started his bass tracking, I started taking Jord's finished drum tracks and started putting guitars on them. At the time, thinking I'm going to save some time, and in the end, it did save time. So I was starting to do the left-hand channel guitars, for example. And I thought, this is great. This is great. We've kind of like, we figured out what I'm going to play in the left-hand channel in the practice space. And then we'll figure out all together in the studio, when I'm recording the right-hand channel and the solos. And that'll be, I was really excited for that. And, but it turned out I had to do the second guitar on my own and my vocals as well, in my house.
So
So
that sounds like one of the weirdest recording experiences imaginable, because didn't you did it in a couple of chunks as well, where you did some summertime recording, some October recording, right? Like this is like kind of a bizarre approach for you guys, if I'm reading this correctly.
Um, it's not completely foreign to what we've done. Like in the past record I was happy to do a lot of the I was happy to do my vocals on my own. But I do like the collaborative effort when it comes to putting more vocals on top of that, or I like having feedback from other people while I'm recording a second guitar part. And that was absent this time. But yeah, we did I think why we did the drum tracking the way we did was we thought we thought that would relieve some pressure. You know, we can concentrate on maximize, say, what 5 or 6 songs in August or whenever we started, or July, I can't
Mhm.
remember, and then set those aside from everyone's mental space, go back to the practice space, work on 5 or 6 others, like get them just exactly where we want them, and then just concentrate on those. It seemed like a good idea, and it was unfolding like a good idea, um, until we ran out of time.
Mm.
It seemed like, oh fuck, this wasn't a good idea. Uh, oh well.
So, did you like Jord's AOT kit with the smaller cymbals? I know there was a lot of gear switching around for Jord's performances. We talked about that last time Jord was on the podcast a little bit. How'd you like that?
Um, I think it was good. It was interesting, and I think it translates into the record sounding a little different, which is important to me. That sonically, some things need to sound different, and the smaller cymbals, um, which I think is a very good idea live.
Mhm.
I wasn't by the end of the recording process, I wasn't as jazzed on using the smaller cymbals in on the record. I felt like, um, although I should step back and say, I feel like in the overall mix, it really left a lot more room
Mhm.
for for other things. But what I'm used to hearing from Jord, it was it was a little bit of a culture shock when the mixes started coming back in, and I was like, "Fuck, the cymbals are there, probably at a reasonable level, but it's not what I'm used to hearing." And I had sort of a little bit of buyer's remorse at that point. Um, but I've kind of acclimatized to it now, and um, I think critically, Jord hasn't indicated that he's disappointed in how they turned out. That was my worry. Once we had everything recorded, I was sending it down to Jason Livermore, and I was hearing the raw tracks by themselves. I was like soloing, the overheads. I'm like, fuck, these cymbals are quiet. These
Mhm.
this I'm probably again within tolerance of the average record, but I was worried we went too far. But nobody else has indicated that they share that they at any point they shared that concern. So good.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
So then
So Todd is in the studio at the same time as you're at home. He's doing bass and you're doing guitars kind of at the same time.
Todd was doing bass. He did his vocals in the studio with JP, and he was doing on a couple tracks. He played second guitar on Guiding Lights,
Oh, cool.
on Fire, maybe mostly his songs.
Oh, cool.
Or- I can't. I'd have to go look at the sessions right now. But he played second guitar or like little bits and pieces on most songs, so he was doing that in the studio as well. Um, while I was doing stuff at home.
Yeah. Well, I know that you originally intended for Beeve to be on it a little bit and for Sulin to be on it a little bit. And I know that Sulin is on there a little bit, but Beeve is not, unfortunately. That's just kind of the way the process worked out. But did you have any commentary on the involvement from Sulin at all?
I wish there was more. I wish
Yeah.
there was more. Like there was um like I think what like Sulin is also trying to blaze their own musical path, and they were right in the middle of making their own record.
Yeah.
And um it was difficult to, like, when I first said, Sulin, you got to play guitar on these songs, and I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding between Sulin and I, where I was thinking they would be playing, like a full on rhythm track along with my guitar, but in Sulin's mind, they were thinking they were adding atmosphere.
Sure.
And so when I got back Sulin's first tracks, I was like, oh, okay. So, I mean, this is very cool, but it's now I have to play the second rhythm guitar. And then by the time they submitted their second, interpretations for a song, we were already like, Livermore's waiting for the mixes had started. And
Yeah.
okay, well, fuck, now we're fucked. Um, it just didn't, it was it felt like a crazy time in the
Yeah.
latter, right before mixing, right before my shoulder surgery. Like I had to get the guitars done because I was not gonna be able to play guitar for months.
Right.
Uh, and then Epitaph also had a deadline if we wanted the record to come out in a reasonable time period. Like if we didn't make it, we were looking maybe at fall of 2025, which is like, fuck, that's too long.
Yeah.
Oh, there was just like a real convergence of time crunches. Um, but again, it's all fine,
Yeah.
it's all fine.
For sure. Well, tell me about that experience of being in your basement, doing the guitars, doing the vocals, like all by yourself. Because for me, I would thrive with immediate feedback. But when no one else is there, that seems like it would be hard to get. So what's that like for you? Because I know you've done that a lot in the past and you work pretty comfortably with that. But I mean, for me, that would be a pretty isolating and lonely feeling.
Yeah, there was some of that. Like again, I don't mind doing the lead vocals completely on my own. I feel like I know how to do that. I know what I want. I know what I'm listening for on the main vocal. And I'm good at it. So I wasn't uncomfortable with that, and I was expecting to do that to a large degree. Although I also like, I like doing it with other people collaboratively as well. But guitar wise, especially second guitar wise, like I felt so scattered with the time pressure, and trying to keep Sulin in mind. Like, what would Sulin like to play here? Like,
Hmm.
well, not even in terms of technically what they might prefer, like aesthetically, what might Sulin do in this section? And I was like, I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. But what do I like? And what are Todd and Jord gonna like? And we just weren't set up where I could get that instant feedback. So I was like, you know, just throwing stuff at the wall and hoping people would like it. And um, I think overall people thought what was happening was cool when they finally heard it. But with the time crunch, it's like they better like this. 'Kay.
Hmm.
Like I'm feeling a lot of pressure to get, I have two guitars to do, I have these lead vocals to do, I have to do the whatever backup vocals, I'm gonna have to figure that out. Um I just felt like I felt pretty stressed.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
But
Um,
I mean, I felt more stressed probably than I've ever felt recording, but sometimes I mean, I always feel there's always going to be some stress in trying to finish a record. So,
yeah. Well, that does sound a little jarring. Let's talk about something fun. Tell me about the gear rundowns. What did you use? What are listeners hearing on these records that you personally use for like a gear list?
okay, on the left-hand channel, I have a Friedman, it's called a BE 100 amp, and I got that because on the last record I borrowed our friend Doreen Preston's Friedman BE 100, and I thought, I thought it really sounded cool. So I got one of my own that I thought even sounded better, and used that on the left channel. Just basically plug, as far as I can remember, I just plugged straight in. Although I should say it was plugging straight in from a reamp signal. So at home I was recording with a DI, and using like a Fractal Audio FM9 to generate a sound that was close to my Friedman, it's low gain, and just something that was going to resemble what the final guitar tone would be. And then we plugged straight in from that DI into the Friedman, and that's the left-hand channel. And then the right-hand channel, we tried this, a Marshall JMP, like this vintage amp. And on that one, there's a little tiny fuzz pedal. We weren't using it for fuzz. It was more just for drive to the JMP. And that was also a reamp. What happened there though is when Jason Livermore got the tracks, he was like, guys went too far with the low gain. Like I think we need a little more out of this. So he ended up reamping it through a combo of, I think, a JMP, a Rev generator, probably what's the name of that company? Fuck, I can't remember. Bogner, some sort of Bogner amp. And he tried to like capture the spirit of what we had put there, the guitar tone we had put there, but just kind of notched it up a bit in terms of how it would cut through. And I thought it lost a couple of vibes in that process, but it also overall gained a vibe that I was like, okay, I hear what you're saying. Like things sound a little more cohesive when we're at full blast. So ultimately it all worked out, and it just getting there was kind of chaotic.
What kind of guitars did you and Todd play?
I played my my usual Gibson SG for I think all the guitar tracks. Yeah, I think all my guitar tracks. And then Todd played on one song for the second guitar, Guiding Lights. He played a 7-string that Beeve built.
Rockin'.
I think that's what he did. Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, and then he has like, I can't remember the name of the company, but John Petrucci plays these guitars. He has one of those, and he played that on a song or two, I think. And then he used my guitar on another song, I think. Yeah.
Nice. What's your vocal mic recording setup at home?
Well, my typical setup is a SM7B, but I did a little shootout at home of I have a U87, a Neumann U87, but JP had this mic. It might be called, company might be called Sound Deluxe or something. I'm not sure, but it was like an imitation of a U67, a Neumann U67. And it didn't necessarily sound better than the U87 or the SM7B. It just, in the moment, how I heard my voice reacting to it in my ears felt more, it was more a performance thing than the sonic quality. They're all equally great mics for vocals, but it was just, that was the one that performance-wise felt the best.
I'm amazed the sounds that you're able to get out of that little space in your basement whenever you do vocals, because it's just a normal room with like normal drywall and sheetrock, It doesn't seem like it's like decked out like any kind of studio with special acoustics or anything.
Yeah, I think he can make good recordings in any space.
I agree.
Depending on where you put the mic, and if the source material is decent, the source is good, then you're pretty much home free. And sometimes sometimes a room that's not acoustically perfect or sympathetic. Maybe you get something that sounds a little more interesting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's been 8 years since Victory Lap. What are some of the biggest areas of growth or, proudness that you have for yourself as a performer, as a writer, as a band? What are some like general takeaways that you're feeling good about in like areas of growth?
Um, what I think on this record in the practice space, it was our first time ever, um, consciously trying to make sure the songs didn't sound frantic.
Mm,
In the past, we've always put a real premium on we want things to sound almost out of control,
mhm,
and usually we do that by jacking up tempos to a point where maybe you gain a sense, the frantic sense, but you lose a bit of groove or something. And
mhm.
this record, we really we went out of our comfort zone on tempos where we'd pull stuff back. Like we'd be playing it at a certain tempo, and we'd say, "Well, let's try it a little slower." And then we were like, "Okay, let's go even slower." And it was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, what's going on? Is this too slow?" But we kind of committed to that, the spirit of that, and um, that's probably the biggest change, um, in terms of songwriting is not to rely on uh speed to impart this sense of energy to the songs.
Yeah. I've said this many times publicly as a fan of the band, but I think that Cutting to the Earth from Potemkin City Limits, which is a slower song, is arguably one of the most impressively recorded and performed Propagandhi songs. So for me, I am all about that. Like I have just really embraced that kind of tempo shifting stuff as I've gotten older. So I, for one, am very excited about those details. So I just wanted to say that for the record that I think that's great.
Cool.
Um, so do you have any special little anecdotes from the studio experience that are like funny or interesting that like really like 30 years from now you'd be like, "Oh man, remember when we were in the studio doing At Peace and we were like this happened?" What is anything like that that may spring to mind that may linger with you for like the rest of your life?
Uh, well, I mean, it's not particularly exciting, but it just refers back to this conscious collective decision to ease back on tempos, um, to turn things down, um, and try to find the essence of the song without volume, speed, extra gain, yeah, I'm kind of drawing a blank on actual studio anecdotes, um, maybe because I've tried to block some of that out.
Well, Chris, I'm really stoked about the record. I'm just delighted that you were willing to hang out and talk about some gear, talk about some writing experiences, talk about, the kind of the stressful and frantic nature of it. But I mean, the results speak for themselves. Y'all came through with an absolute banger for everybody, and we are very grateful for your music over the years. Um, and I'm really just grateful to you for continuing to come on the podcast once in a while and tell the listeners about what's going on in your world. It means a lot. So thank you so much for being here and talking production with me today.
Cheers, Greg, and vice versa. Obviously, we really appreciate the unbelievable time and energy you've put into this project.
I am at peace, these days. Give and take a fit of blinding rage.
Jason Livermore, welcome back to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi.
Hi, how you doing?
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. It's been a couple years since you were here. We talked a little bit in the aftermath of the release of the remixed and remastered Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. I think we talked in 2021, maybe early 2022. But if anybody out there listening wants to go back and hear that first conversation with you, it's a real good one because you talked about your entire history of working with Propagandhi. And so we're back because there's a new Propagandhi record and you are involved. Please tell me when you started hearing word about working on the new Propagandhi record at Peace.
Oh, geez. Probably the beginning of last year, maybe. I think Chris texted me at some point in the beginning of 2024 and said, "Yo, J man, are you up for another?" I think was the gist of it.
Yeah.
And my answer was always, So that's when he talked to me originally. Kind of gave me a few updates here and there as things progressed, and I think we kind of locked down some sort of like November. Maybe it was like November that got pushed back to December because everybody's always late.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was about the timeline of how things originated. Yeah.
Great. When did you start? Did you hear anything? Did you start hearing any music from them at all, or was it all a complete surprise until they started sending in like the finished tracks from JP? Did you hear any demos or anything like that?
No, I didn't hear anything. Right before I was supposed to start mixing, Chris had been asking me questions about the guitars, like maybe a month before. Hey, if we don't like the guitars, can we fix the tones, kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. As long as you track DIs and we can do whatever. So that was kind of in the back of his mind. But I don't know, maybe a few days or something before they were going to send them off, he texted me and he was like a little concerned. He's like, hey man, yeah, well, we went over the album last night and we checked it all out and we're not real sure if it's as good as Victory Lap was. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, send me what you got and I'll let you know, And he sent it over and the music was all there. The recording was good, but maybe was a little different than Victory Lap was. When Victory Lap came in, it sounded really, really good. And this sounded like a little bit more raw than that did. So I wasn't put off or scared by that at all, because that's what I do is take things and try to make them better. But
Nice.
they were concerned. They get concerned sometimes, and so I had to put them at ease. Nah, we'll fix all this. And then he told me what he had concerns with, and one of the things was they did this on Victory Lap too. They reamped the guitars after Chris had recorded them, changed the tone. If you're not familiar with what reamping guitar means, so you take a direct signal out of the guitar itself. So you have like basically what sounds like an acoustic guitar on a track. And then you can play that track out through a real guitar rig, like as if you were playing live, and change the tone of it, get a new sound.
Wow.
So he wasn't real sure about some of the guitar tones that they had gotten, and I was in agreement with him that they were maybe a little bit too they had different tones, but one of the tones I didn't like that much. I thought it was too clean for what they were going for. So I told him we would reamp him. One of my guys here, Colton Crone, he's a guitar genius. He said, oh yeah, let's do it. So we hooked up a few different amps. I can't remember exactly what they were. It was a Marshall of some sort. And I know we used a Rev, which is a Canadian amp company that Colton here is buddies with. I think he may even be endorsed by them. But I told Chris, and Chris is like, oh yeah, those guys are right down the street from me. I was like, oh wow, that's cool. Well, I guess tell them we're using their amp.
Nice.
So so we reamped one of the guitars while listening back to some of their older material to make sure we're in the ballpark and it kind of achieved what I thought it needed to achieve. And I'd send that over to Chris, and he was stoked. So we just kept going with that.
Nice. Yeah, I know that the recording process for guitar was very stressful for him. He and I chatted
Yeah.
on this for this episode. He's before you, and listeners can, kind of read between the lines that he had not a great time, it sounds like, doing guitars. Just a lot of stress, a lot of deadlines. Um, he mentioned he was dealing with a shoulder injury and he was doing all the guitars at home by himself. So it sounds great that you were able to help him out so much, because it probably made him feel a lot better about the process after it was all said and done.
Yeah, no, I think that he puts trust into me to, make sure whatever they're doing is going to work out the way they want.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nice. It puts him at ease, and it puts me at ease, that knowing that, that he's like letting me do my thing. So I'm just free to do my thing instead of second guessing what I'm doing. Oh, is he going to like this? Is he going to like that? Like, just do what you think is right. And then, like, your best work usually pops out,
Yeah. So, this is a different process for you. You didn't track this record. I know that you guys tracked down to Blasting Room for supporting cast, 15, 16 years ago at this point. But
Yeah.
for the last three, you've done some various work on the last three now. But how do you get all of this stuff from Private Ear to Blasting Room? Like, how does all that transferring work for all these files? Because there's so many pieces. I'd be so afraid that something would get lost in the shuffle,
Oh, yeah, well, sometimes it does get lost in the shuffle. uh, Essentially, JP and Chris, whoever was like fully in charge of like accumulating all the stuff they had and put it into one session, would just put it in a folder and put it up on Dropbox, and I would download it from Dropbox. And from there, I have guys that work with me that take that and sort of make sure everything seems copacetic, and then they prepare the files for me. I have, like, when I'm mixing, I like to see things laid out in a certain manner, which I'm familiar with, so I don't have to like think about files. I can just think about music. So I have guys that do that. They put the drums in the order that I want, the bass, put everything in the order that I want, make sure it's all there. And if there's a question, hey, this song doesn't have a guitar on the right channel, or something weird, then I'll be like, hey, Chris, what happened here? And I'm like, oh shit, let me look on the file, and something happened. Like, so things will happen sometimes where something gets lost in the shuffle. But after, even if it makes it through my mixing process, I'll send it to Chris, and I'll be like, oh no, that was the wrong track that I sent you, or something, so we'll have to redo it. And it all gets ironed out. But essentially, that's kind of the process.
Yeah. So, as a drummer, I'm very curious about your thoughts on the drums on this record, because it doesn't sound like the drums on any other Propagandhi record. JP and I talked about it, Jordan and I talked about it, like the drum selection with the wood hoop AOTs and the smaller cymbals. There's a lot more space on this record to me for other stuff besides drums. Tell me what your thoughts are on the drums in general.
I mean, honestly, I didn't notice that too much. I'm too busy like air drumming to Jord's amazing fills, like whenever he's got a yeah, I gotta turn that thing up to 20,
Yeah.
So like that's the shit that I get stoked on, is when Jord's like just ripping,
Yeah.
And he's always ripping. So I didn't notice like a crazy change per se from that respect. I mean, I know that the drums, they sounded a little different. They were a little darker tonality wise. And they weren't quite as like bombastic as the last record, if you will. Like, they were slightly more natural when they came to me. I tried to blow them up a little bit. I want everything to sound like bigger and better than it really is, So yeah, I didn't put my finger on that quite like that way, like as of those guys who are sitting there making decisions on different drums. Oh, this is going to be this way, this is going to be that way. For me, I just get it in and just go, oh, I want it to sound like this. And then I start doing my, my stuff, my EQ, my compression, and it kind of ends up how it comes out of my brain, regardless of how it started, unless it's really far off.
Yeah, do you did you notice that there's a lot of differences with regards to like some new musical territory for the band? Because to me, this record doesn't sound like any of their other records. There's a lot of like way different pacing and tempo wise. It feels like new musical territory. Does that feel like that to you at all as a fan of the band, but also somebody who's worked with them
Yeah.
20 years?
No, I definitely noticed. And I don't mean this as like a slight at all, but there's not like a hit per se. It's not like as poppy. They're not poppy, but you get what I mean. It was just not like a hit. They're more like all really excellent album tracks, if you will. Like more, and the biggest thing I noticed is there's like I think half of the record has Todd songs, and usually he's limited to like 3 or 4. I don't want to say limited, but he usually has like a third of the album, and this is definitely he's got half the album.
Mm-hmm.
And his songs usually have sort of they have a different vibe, but even for him, his kind of are different from each other. Uh, there's there's an oddball there. Chris has got kind of like an 80s-esque sounding song on there. And then there's a few on there that sound like straight up 80s metal, like Dio wrote them or something. Like
Yes.
they all kick ass, so what you're saying is like there are a few different genres, if you will. The record does have a very heavy theme to it though, lyrically and just the way the songs hit you. It's pretty heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, the Dio reference is wonderful because there's a song in there called Prismatic Spray, the Tinder date.
Yeah, that's the first song that I mixed. And that's
Really?
that's probably my favorite one.
Dude, that's my favorite Chris song on the record as well, is that one.
It's my favorite one. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that our favorite one mutually for Chris is not the lead single. Because to me, At Peace is the song that is most familiar to long-term Propagandhi fans. If you're familiar with the modern era of Propagandhi, like from Empires on, I feel like At Peace is going to be the most recognizable and immediately digestible song for you.
Right.
And the rest of it is going to be a lot of new territory for listeners, which I'm stoked about because I don't want to hear the same thing over and over.
Totally. No. Yeah, the Tinder date song is kind of like an extension of Victory Lap, like, yes, this thing fucking rips,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about Todd's vocals to me are very new as well. His vocal
Yeah.
delivery is very smooth, very
Yeah.
silky. It's almost like he's singing for like a clean metal band like Catatonia or something like that. Tell me what your thoughts are on Todd's vocal performance this time around.
I loved him. I thought and I don't know if this is true because I haven't spoken with him, but it sounded like he took like vocal lessons or something, he put more energy in his life to hone this craft of singing, singing more than like just straight up screaming,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought sounded killer. And Todd is usually the one who's seemingly the most particular about the way the vocals in their songs are presented. I'll do them how I think they need to be done. And sometimes he'll come back and go, you know what? We don't need that delay on this voice, or, you know what? We don't need this reverb. Like it's fine how it is, and he wants to keep things pretty true sounding. Not say, let's say overproduced, if you will. But this time he has like these kind of grandiose, sort of Dio-esque metal songs. And so we were experimenting. I mean, it's not like crazy amounts, but with reverb and whatnot on his vocals. So he was particular about how much reverb in what spots that he wanted things. And, so that was kind of fun,
Yeah. Something I commented to Todd in a private message between he and I told him that I appreciated his vocal performance a lot on this record because it's not like other records. And he mentioned specifically that he felt less competition with the drums as the volume of the drums and the cymbals. He said that he feels that the smaller cymbal size was nice because his vocals didn't have to compete while he was recording with them. So there's definitely a lot of new stuff that I think they experience as a band on this record process.
Right. That's cool.
how much are you able to internalize and enjoy what's happening as somebody who's also working on the record, right? Because this is a job for you. So are you able to sit there and enjoy what's happening, or is it like a very professional thing where you are just in the zone professionally, or are you also able to appreciate what's happening? Because you're like the second or third person who gets to hear this stuff in the whole world. Like, what's that like for you as far as like enjoyment versus the work?
I think the enjoyment for me comes after it's closer to completion. You know, when I get it, it's not like I'm turning off my emotional brain, you know, and just being a scientist about it, but a little bit like in order to things to sound the way that I expect them and others expect them to be, I sort of have to be, you know, okay, this is how loud this goes, and this goes this loud, and that goes that loud. And, you know, so I get that going. And then after it's, you know, honed in, then I may just sit there with my eyes closed and just see how I feel, you know, like how am I feeling like now? Like, no, this isn't right, you know, whatever. And then you go back to nitpicking or whatever. Then it becomes a back and forth with the band after that about, you know, this up, this down, blah, blah, blah. But generally, like what you're saying about enjoyment, that comes afterwards. Like on the way here, like I put the record on and I listened, you know, I couldn't listen to the whole thing, but I listened to a lot of it. And, you know, and that's when you're just, yes, you know, like this kicks ass, you know.
Yeah. Man, tell me about you know, that 80s song you mentioned, Stargazing.
Yeah.
Brand new territory for the band. It's like Rush, Bruce, like it's great stuff. Tell me about, and also like Tina Turner, like it feels so dancey. Tell me about your thoughts on that song, because I love that one.
You know, when I heard it, I was kind of like, is this for Chris's Patreon? You know, like I kind of like I was like, is this song? Did I get sent this song by mistake? You know, but I love it's a killer song, and I got into the mood of it and sort of leaned into like, I'm like, this is kind of an 80s song. I'm going to lean into this and sort of give it some extra production, you know, spruce to it. And Chris was totally stoked on it. I mean, you're right. It's totally different than anything they've done, but it kind of struck me in the same way as the first time I heard Zucosis, you know, where I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of a different thing. It's more mellow, and I don't know if it's introspective, you know, but it's not just like I'm out there angry at the whole world as much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I loved it. I thought it was cool. I'm curious to see how other people, you know, will dig it.
Yeah, and another outlier for me that's really brand new is the closer. Something needs to die, but maybe not you. I can't remember the title off the top of my head, but it's a very bizarre one where Chris has that almost that snarled line of "Creation don't make no trash," dude. Another wild one. I just think it's so cool how much is new on this.
Right. No, you're totally right. Besides like the songwriting, and this isn't new for them, but I think it's been perfected with age, is that Chris is, like you mentioned Todd's vocals, but Chris's vocals to me, man, he sounds like a king. Like his vocals are just regal. Like he's just up there like, yes, I am going to tell you how it is, you know, with this just rich, deep, lush voice. And it's like, that's what really gets me a lot of times. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so good. Your voice sounds so nice, you know? You know? Yeah, and Todd's as well, you know, like you're saying, it's like, but Chris is really, he's got his delivery dialed.
Yeah, it's a really vocally special album. And I really hope that listeners and fans of the band go with the band on this journey. Like, I'm almost terrified that it's going to be like how Potemkin City Limits was like so new and bizarre to fans at the time that people didn't like give it the work that it deserved.
It takes them 15 years to get into it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want it to be like that. I want people to go on the journey with the band on this record. So that's why I'm just like really, you know, leading the charge on this because it's so special. What's the back and forth like during the mixing and mastering process for you? Like how frequently are you in touch? How much do you have to redo? What's that like?
So I'll get the tracks, you know, and I'll mix it until so for the first song that I mix, generally I'll spend longer on that, because I am trying to basically figure out how the record should sound, in my opinion. They'd given me rough mixes of what they had, and then I, listen to that and go, okay, that's cool, but here's what I think it should sound like. And so I do my thing, and then I'll take it home. I'll listen to it in my car and be like, oh, this is cool. I think I need to try something different, or I think I need to try this or that. And I may go through 3 or 4 different versions. Like, they're not huge versions, but just different ways you can present the music, and how it impacts you emotionally. And once I get there on my first one, that may take me 4 hours, that may take me 4 days, like, to get to where I'm very happy with the first song. Then I'll send it to the guys, and they'll sit with it for however long they need, and get back with me about changes or just observations, about like the treatments and whatnot. And we'll go from there. And in order to not get too hung up on like that, because you can get really bogged down if you just start nitpicking things, I would say, okay, that's cool. Like, if they don't completely love it, but like, let me move on to another song. Cause like you're saying, they're all different. And like, let's see if we can stumble or into something that, the longer you work on something, the more you kind of get honed in on it. Then you're just dialed in, and then you figure it out, after a few days. Oh, I know what this needs now. And then you kind of get like 3 or 4 done like that. And then it'll be like, okay, yeah, we love this. But like on this song, we like that you made Chris's voice loud on this first one, but this one, we want his voice, tucked into the music just a little more, to feel the energy of the music more, that kind of stuff. So it's almost, after I get into it and we get into it, it's daily. I'll do like 1 or 2 songs a day, send them over. Depending on who's around, who's available, I could get notes immediately. Generally not so much anymore. It'll be the next day or in a couple of days, they'll text me or email me back their changes, and I'll implement them and send them back. That could happen. Like, there could be one where everyone loves it. There's no changes, it's less rare, but, I'm looking at I've got a mix session open and it says version 4. So like I made it to 4 versions on one of these songs, probably a few of them if I open it up and look, but it doesn't get up past, like, what do I got? Oh, I got one on 7. I got 7 versions of one. Okay. Yeah. 7 versions of one, 6 versions of another, 3 of one, 10 of another. Okay. So it's usually little baby stuff. Like, hey, Todd wants to hear the bass, like a little more distorted, okay. And I'll send it to him. Then, a week later, I'll be like, I think you went too far, okay. And, I'll undo it. Todd wants, the vocals to be this or that, and they'll take it in, as long as it's not a hard deadline. You have to take it in. Like, sometimes your first reaction is just like what you were expecting. And so you just shut it down. So the longer you sort of take it in, you might be like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, he was right. Or, so they take it in for a little bit and then give me, like, if it's still just weighing on them, they'll let me know like what changes they wanted.
Awesome.
And we'll just, yeah.
Very cool. What about a mastering chain or anything like that? Any comments on that kind of stuff?
It's basically the same chain that I use for most projects, with the exception of when I do the mixing and I'm mastering, and I end up doing a far amount less during mastering, because my mixes have kind of already gone through I changed my mixing style from when I used to work on the console, and as soon as I got off the console into my new mastering room, like 7 years ago, I started mixing in the computer. But I'm going through my mastering chain. So I'm sort of mastering and mixing at the same time now. So my mixes are very close to completion. And then I'll just kind of give it one little fine-tooth comb when I'm finished and see if I can eke out a few more percentage points of goodness,
Yeah. How much does the track sequence come into play when you're doing a mix? Does that come in later, or is that do you have any say in that, or is the band deciding along the way?
The band decide well, it depends on, what my role in the production is. But with these guys, the band decided after the fact. They may have had cards up their sleeve, but I don't think so, because Chris was asking me what the first song should be, and I told him the Tinder date should be the first song.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, "Oh, my son said that too." And I was like, "Okay." And then now it's like, I think song 9 or something. So like, they do what they do what they want. It definitely, when you're mastering, you have to like change the songs then, mostly for like volume and tonality reasons, to try to get them to flow into each other without having to like reach over and grab the volume knob. How much space you give between them to sort of like give yourself some downtime after you've just been bludgeoned like for 5 minutes of, like that kind of thing. Some bands have their sequence ahead of time. Not this time. Yeah.
Cool. So, Jason, my last question. My friend Paul he's an engineer. He's an audio engineer in Winnipeg, and he's curious about glue compressors, and he wants to know if you have any input on glue compressors.
Well, on this record and on a fair amount of records that I do, I'm using an Allen Smart C2 compressor, which is basically like a clone of what's in the SSL console. So on the SSL, there's a compressor built into the board, and you just turn it on and it compresses the whole mix. And since I don't mix on the console anymore, I use that. It's like a clone. And I would say, probably at least 50% of the rock mixers in the world probably also use that compressor, since it works so well. But that's what I use on a lot of rock stuff that I do.
Awesome. Jason Livermore, thank you for your return to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandhi. Thank you for telling me the story of the mixing and the mastering of At Peace. It's a real pleasure to have you and John Paul Peters and Chris Hanna all featured on the same episode to talk about the creation of this record from start to finish, and all of the production and engineering that went into it. It's been a real pleasure, man. Thank you so much for coming back and telling me your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Reconvene. Oh yes, I'm ready for it. Body shot, dig on my face with a sharpie. Excuse me, sir, this is an Arby's. I am at peace. I am at peace.
What you all have been up to since tour. So the last shows were in October, and we're now in August. So we're, like 9-10 months later at this point, since those shows happened. And I know a lot is going on behind the scenes and with the band right now. And I know that you all have been writing, and I'm sure that everybody would just love to hear a little bit about what you guys have been up to since last fall.
Well, we started working on our tunes and getting all rocking and going and having a good time. And then, Jord or Chris's shoulders started to freeze and get sore, and Jord actually cut his Achilles tendon, some sharp thing on the door, so he had to wear one of those boot things for a couple of months. So we were back down to just chilling for a while. We're having a great time jamming. Like, I feel like I was just keep thinking, these are awesome songs, and it's always fun. It's fun to be there, just making those songs, trying to figure them out, and I'm feeling really good about the tunes. So, they seem like I feel like we're improving, kind of.
Does this remind you of the Today's Empires era, where there were, I believe there were numerous injuries during the recording process for Empires, right? Where it wasn't like there issues with injuries then too?
We always have something going on, I think, between the three of us. I've had every injury in humanity's possibilities. So.
Amazing. Is Jord out of the boot now? Is he all back to
he's rocking,
full strength?
He's kicking away at that little pedal thing, and that was a good time.
Very good. How many songs like are you bringing to the table this album cycle around? Because sometimes you brought like 5 to the records, like with Potemkin, and then sometimes it's just like is a couple of 2, like with Victory Lap. So I was wondering how many songs are you feeling like are coming out from you on this time around?
I'm hoping maybe 5 this time if I can, or I don't know. I don't really think such like that. I just, when something's done, just like, okay, there it is, you know. But right now I have at least, well, I have like 10 on, you know what I mean? But like we've jammed like 3 all the way through. And then I got like a couple more, you know, that just gotta, I guess 4 we've jammed, 5 actually.
Cool.
Yeah, there's one that was and one that was just kind of abandoned just because there was not lyrics yet for supporting cast. And then yeah, and then Chris just sent it to me. Oh, we got to revive this one, you know. I was like, okay, yeah, it's a good, yeah. And then I put it on. I was like, yeah, it's a good one. You just kind of forget, you know.
Very cool. That's awesome. I know that Chris made a post as well on his Patreon that he all of a sudden just kind of came through and he's like, I kind of feel like I have the solid skeletons of like 7 songs. So
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome. Are you guys kind of shooting for a 12 songer on this time around?
I doubt it. It's kind of like, you know what I mean? You might as well do something with the other 2 songs, or I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, I just find with 12 songs, then a couple end up getting just kind of lost in the shuffle anyway. So
yeah. Do you?
It's always disappointing to like. That's the most disappointing thing about a record is you always know like something's gonna get stuck somewhere, and you know what I mean.
Kind of reminds me of like how Laughing Stock is like such an awesome banger and how it wound up on like a flexi that just kind of got, you know, out into the world like that. And I know it came out digitally later and stuff like that, but it's kind of not the same as having that included with a record like Victory Lap. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that one was just like we're just out of time by just like a tiny little bit and had to be done.
Yeah.
There's another version of it too that's good. Like I don't know, somewhere in the world. So we've recorded it twice.
Maybe you guys could do Where Quantity is Job Number 1, Volume 2, and put all these things that were on like the deluxe editions and stuff on like a Bandcamp download and just be like, all right, here's another like LP worth of stuff that is like outtakes and B-sides and stuff like that. And I don't know, it could be a fun project someday to kind of
there wouldn't be too much, there wouldn't be too many of those songs though. Like usually we end up recording most things, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Do you have like a vibe for these songs? Like, is it kind of, because, you know, the records that you guys make, none of them sound like each other. I mean, each one sounds different. And is there like a vibe that you're kind of feeling with this one that kind of reminds you of any of the particular eras of the band or anything like that? Or does this feel like pretty fresh, pretty new? Do you guys feel like this is a new direction at all?
A little bit, like I don't know. I feel like we're always just kind of pushing some direction, or not pushing a direction, but just like we almost take every song as like its own little entity, you know. Like it's like I would say, like, you know, like sometimes you're sitting there with a guitar and it's acoustic. Sometimes you're sitting there with electric guitar. Sometimes you're, you know, playing something else, and yeah, I don't know. It's just
love it.
Yeah, it's just like each song is like, it's more just like, I don't know, like we're not really thinking about it. It's just like as soon as something crosses our mind, I guess we're trying a few different guitar techniques that we've never done before, which is kind of fun. It's just like difficult, you know what I mean? Because you have to actually learn the mechanics of how to do it and stuff like that. So
nice. Are you utilizing the Beeve 7-string that he made for you in any of your writing process this time around?
I've been playing on it, but I haven't really yet. Well, I have some riffs that I've put the 7-string on, but I haven't made anything out of them yet, you know?
Nice. That thing is that thing's amazing. Have you been are you enjoying Beeve's guitar that he made for you? Yeah,
for sure. I've been using it. I just haven't yeah. And then like if I make it, then Chris will also have to get a 7-string, and then you know what I mean? But that we don't really let that kind of stuff stop us. We just kind of do it, and then He had one at some point. I don't know what happened to him.
How's the jam space going for Chris with his shoulder problem? Are you guys able to get through some of the rehearsals and stuff like that, even though he's not like at full strength at the moment?
Yeah, he got a little stand for his guitar. I used to have one of those too when I hurt my back. Yeah, you just kind of have a stand with your guitar on it and just kind of stand behind it.
Do you mean like, so I'm picturing like like at a big rock show, right? Like somebody would have an electric guitar and then they would have the acoustic on a stand and then they would like walk up and strum the acoustic and then go back to playing on their electric. Is that what he's doing?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. Love to see that. Well, I'm glad that you're excited about it. I know that everybody out there will be really pumped to hear that, you know, y'all are hard at work and that things are enjoyable and that you're having fun with it. Obviously that's the most important thing at the moment. So thank you for the update on the writing process. That's really cool. How are you? I'm curious about how you're feeling as like a songwriter these days. Is because like as I get older, I think about how much harder things feel to do, like getting through like a piece of writing or like getting through some things in like my day job. They just feel like a lot more tedious sometimes, and like it doesn't come as naturally to me on a lot of days the way it felt when I was a bit younger. I'm wondering if you're noticing any difference in your own songwriting compared to like something like 20 years ago. You know, I'm wondering if you're having if you're resonating with me on how I feel about aging and doing some of my own work, and if it's more challenging or if you've like feel like you've gotten better at it. I'm just wondering about your thoughts on that.
I feel like I'm in a better spot than I was like a while ago, which is why I had less songs on supporting cast, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just kind of changed my method a little bit. Like, I started learning how to play a lot of other bands' songs and that to see what's making them tick. And then I take a lot of art courses where there's a lot of critiques of your art. And so I try to apply all the critiques to my music, you know, like if you have a picture, you know, you want like areas of density versus areas of rest, you know, like kind of big, medium, small shapes and like all this kind of thinking. I try to take it to music, you know, like just the whole flow and composition of it all, you know. I just try to think of the song the same way as a painting, you know, and then trying to make it more based around the vocals and that than riffs. So I was finding it just like I was ending up trying to sing over too complicated of riffs, which is can be cool, but it's also kind of difficult. And then, or I don't know, maybe less good actually in a way. And then I find now like it doesn't seem like the songs are any less hard. Like once you go and start like messing around and making things more difficult, you know, I just find they turn into better songs. Like I just feel like they have like better composition, better I don't know. I just feel like they're good, you know. So.
Nice. I'm glad you brought up art too. I was looking as I follow your art Instagram that you do, and it's really wonderful. And I was chatting with a listener of the podcast.
I am at peace. Some days I'm scared I'm gonna die, or even worse, I might survive.
Jord, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Excellent, thank you. It is wonderful to have you back after. I think we last talked in 2021 for some Propagandhi cover songs, but it's delightful to get together again and hang out and chat about how things have been. Propagandhi has been off the road since September of 2022, and I know there's a lot going on. I'm wondering if you just want to start off by giving a little bit of your general thoughts on the past year and a half since the band has been off the road and what you all have been generally up to in that time.
Yeah, I guess you could say that 2022 was one of the most challenging years that we've ever had in terms of trying to arrange live shows. Like that was a batch of cluster Fs. If you, um, yeah, I mean, we tried to do some shows in May out east in Canada, and then in September out west in Canada. We were supposed to go down the west coast from Seattle to San Diego that September, but yeah, we ended up getting derailed by COVID on both of those trips. So unfortunately, we had to cancel some shows in Saskatchewan on the front end of our May dates, and then the entire back end of our September dates got canceled. We had COVID issue in Vancouver that we were aware of the day that we were supposed to cross into the US, and head down to Seattle and, do 7 shows down the coast. Our booking agent, Margie in the States, did a great job putting everything together. And it was, yeah, the aftermath of having to cancel those dates, it dragged on for another 6 weeks, and we ended up doing 3 makeup dates in Southern California, in Pomona, LA, and San Diego on I think on like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It was so we were starting to kind of write over the course of like that year, getting some riffs together and kind of jamming on new stuff. But we kept going back to perform, like getting prepped for live shows and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it put us really through the ringer. And towards the end of that, it was like, okay, these makeup shows were okay. Trying to play on a show on a Monday or a Tuesday that was originally scheduled for a Friday or Saturday, like it just had the vibe was affected. A lot of people didn't take the rebates on their tickets, and many of them didn't show up. So it was kind of like 2/3 full rooms. And we tried to do our best to kind of accommodate makeup dates, but it was just really hard. And I think a lot of bands that get faced with that, it's like you have slim pickings for the venues, and you're not going to get anything close to the original sort of what the original dates were intended to be like and all that. It was so I think we kind of hung it up at the end of October, and we're just kind of like, okay, that is the end of live shows. Let's just forget about that for a while. And I think at that point it really took the edge off of feeling like we had to do a bit of both, like trying to write, trying to stay engaged with, doing the live stuff. And that's also after a few, the whole COVID era, we didn't play any shows, I guess in between like 2019 and 2022. So there was a big gap there of, and that the pressure slowly mounting. Okay, we got to start doing stuff. What are we going to do and all that? And in a nutshell, it was like 2022 was just kind of a mishmash of trying to go in a million different directions and getting stuck with so much troubleshooting, figuring things out as things were falling apart. And it was really draining. So that just led us to, let's forget about this stuff. We're not going to play anymore until we actually have at least some studio dates penciled in and all that. So I guess that takes us to now. So I don't know if you knew, but we did a number of dates in July, recording at Private Ear here in Winnipeg with our friend GP. Originally, I think it was in May. Yeah, March, April, May of this year, we were thinking that we were going to be recording everything in late October of this year. And we were aware that JP and Vanessa had a few dates open in July, like Tuesday to Thursday dates, 3 consecutive weeks of 3 dates being open, but the Friday to Mondays being blocked off. And they said we could keep our gear set up after we got sounds, and if we wanted to take advantage of that time. And we kind of molded over, and I don't know, originally I thought, no, let's just keep it all together. But then we thought, hey, if we break it up a little bit, that'll give us time to recharge the batteries in between track for a few days, take a few days off to actually kind of continue prepping and working on stuff a little bit in the like miniature downtime that we had between the 3-day sessions. And I think it worked out really good. Like I liked having days on and then days off. It's, I think it was largely circumstantial. We didn't plan it like this, but I think it kind of worked in our favor in a lot of ways. So yeah, we're done a significant bulk of the drum tracks, and we're going to revisit another batch of songs in October, and it's kind of like a 2-part process. So I think from now to October, we'll see about if any other dates become available there to maybe do some bass tracking and stuff and try to get some of the instruments and maybe some vocals, I think, going. And then continue tracking drums in October, and we'll see how things go from there. I think we have some mixing time penciled in for November, December, maybe. Yeah, so everything as of right now is still on track, even though we're pretty early in the process, I guess.
So this seems like a way different way of recording a record than you might be used to, right? Have you ever done it like this before, where it's in these like chunks of time that are like super spread apart over long periods of time?
No, we've usually, kind of, well, at least as far as drums go, we usually kind of get in there and get sounds and just kind of get cracking and try to get the drums done in however many consecutive days possible. I'm thinking back to before we started working with JP at Private Ear. So that would have been supporting cast. Like a lot of those, and when we did Potemkin City Limits, like it was just kind of day after day. I can't remember. I think sometimes we took a Sunday off, but it's just kind of like day after day after day. And that, I think in retrospect, has a way of just kind of wearing you down a little bit. I find the studio tracking process to be like it takes a lot of energy, like to just be mentally on throughout an entire day, where it's like, okay, you get a little bit done in the morning, and then okay, when are we gonna get moving on afternoon stuff? So just trying to stay loose throughout the whole day and engaged, and keeping your blood moving and all that kind of stuff. It's not exactly easy. It's not tremendously, like, it's not rocket science, but it's just kind of, I don't know. Every time I go through it, I feel differently about it a little bit. But this time, I certainly appreciated the little pauses in between to kind of, and I guess I should mention too, like when we at Private Ear, we were leaving all the drums set up. So I'm fortunate enough now to have a kit at home and another one at our practice space. And so I had kind of like 3 kits set up, and it's like, okay, if I'm at home, I can do this. If I'm in the city, there was one night that we were going to crash at my sister's place, and it was just like an opportunity where I could get a good practice day in there, where she was out doing some stuff with some friends. And ultimately, yeah, our room, my sister's place, a little bit hot. I need my cool sleeping zone to recharge my batteries fully. So I ended up spending most of my time practicing out here, just a little out of town, but it worked. I think it worked out pretty good.
Sweet. I'm curious about the preparation of anything that's like maybe totally different than anything you've ever done on past records, or if there's any preparation leading up to this record that might be something that's like unique across all of your recording experiences.
Yeah, well, I think certainly the most unique aspect of kind of juggling through I guess the general process of aging, and having done this for so long, I don't know, I've been struggling with tinnitus since the late 90s, and I actually had this weird situation kind of happen towards the end of 2022, actually, that December, where I was consulting with some hearing specialists and stuff, and I don't know, I'm still trying to put it together. I have like a 2-tone tinnitus issue. Like my tinnitus went haywire on me, and it changed quite a bit to such a like a radically different sort of sensory experience, I guess, 24/7 relentless sensory experience that yeah, I had to really, we spent a lot of time in the early part of 2023 last year refiguring out and measuring decibel levels of our jam space, and kind of coming to some shocking realizations about how much louder it is from the sitting position of where I was at, right behind the drums, and say even 5 or 7 feet over from where the other guys are standing in front of their amps. And even the decibel readings in front of the guitar or bass amps compared to what it was like right by my ears. If I'm playing loud, max sort of cymbal crashing and max exertion and that kind of stuff. So those early months of last year, Chris and I, I gotta really thank those guys for their patience and diligence with helping me figure this stuff out. But we were measuring stuff out at the practice space and just being like, okay, this is completely insane. And I was dealing with 2 different audiologists, just trying to figure out what's safe at this point. Like I can't imagine going through a third sort of phase of this hearing issue and all that. And so yeah, we really took a lot, like it was a number of weeks to figure out dB levels in my basement at our practice space, what adds up, like adding different layers to it and everything else. And what we kind of came to is, like, I started practicing on a drum kit that we've kind of had buried for a good 10 years, thinking that it might be a little bit quieter than our other kits. They have wood hoops on them. We thought maybe if I lightened the gauge of sticks that I was, comfortable playing with, I think since like the later 90s, and pulling back on cymbals, I was playing with extremely light gauge drumsticks and broken cymbals for the better part of last year, just to keep it in check and allow us to spend enough time in there jamming and working on the new material and stuff without kind of exhausting ourselves in our ears. And also, I kind of I've temporarily ditched in-ear monitors, and that was it was really, really tricky. Trying to protect my hearing with earplugs and like industrial cups over top, and then having a external amp kind of blasting at me. So it's this weird, how much of this is one step forward, one step back, and are we really achieving anything? But I think we managed to get it down to a point where, and with the coaching of some of the people, this one audiologist who was measuring the output of my in-ears and trying to get a sense of how loud it would be in our room and stuff. And I think we managed to achieve it. Like we rolled it down to a much more comfortable level. And I think with one thing I'm noticing with the change of the gauge of sticks is that my elbow problems are partially going away as well. Like I'm feeling less wear and tear on my forearms, and I'm just thinking, oh man, if you could go back and change one thing, holy shit. Like I embraced bigger is better, louder is better, faster, everything. This sort of idea of like playing loud music like it's a contact sport. This old Dave Lombardo kind of quote that I sort of wore as like a badge of honor for so many years, just gritting and gutting it out and actually playing in pain a lot of the time. I think I was playing sticks that were just like, Jesus Christ, like these big pieces of lumber, and breaking a lot of stuff at the same time. You're trying to get loud sounds out of the drums. And I think that's one of the tricky things now is playing quieter, but achieving an aggressive sort of tone without slamming the shit out of everything to the point where like I used to hit things like hit it as hard as you can,
Sure.
That's not really that musical, like within that sort of paradigm of just playing hard, it sounds like how it sounds. You're just giving it everything you have, and when you're in your late 20s and 30s, like you can kind of roll with that. But then there's the cumulative effect of your joints and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up having not severe elbow problems, but problematic enough where I wore down some of the tendon, wore down a piece of bone, and I was having this tendon slippage. And anyway, with physiotherapy and that kind of stuff, you can kind of help correct that, which worked for years. But now it's just like, no, play lighter gauge sticks and the whole thing goes away by itself. Good God. Breaking way less cymbals, let me tell you.
What is the gear? Like, did you make any like gear changes for the new record? Like, give me like a little bit of a gear rundown of what like listeners can hear on this record that you all are making.
Well, drum wise, like I said, we went back to this AOT kit that kind of has a bit of a story to it. There was a guy that we knew locally many years ago, was getting a backline company together, and he was getting a number of AOT kits custom made for himself. And I think he needed one more, and they were going to give him like a pretty hefty discount. And he basically approached me and said, if you're looking for one of these kits, like, why don't we go, like, we can split the discount down the middle or whatever. So yeah, we got this really nice custom AOT kit made for us. I think it was around 2002, 2003. And then we we were all excited. Okay, let's take our AOT kit and go back to, BC where these things were made. And we'll track our new record, Potemkin City's Limits, with these drums. And we get out there, and the recording engineer was just like, no, not using these, forget it. He had no interest in them at all. I was like, I don't know. I was confused. I think we had different perspectives of maybe the exact time frame that the kit was produced. I think AOTs went through a lot of ownership changes, and maybe the process for building them changed over time. So I think we have a pretty nice sounding kit, to be honest. But yeah, so he didn't want to use it then. We used the toms on supporting cast, but not the kick or the snare. And then on Failed States, we did the same thing. Like, everybody thought the kick drum it's a 20-inch kick. I think it's a little more standard to have bigger kicks on these recordings, and generally, like, you see a lot of 22s and maybe 24s, but especially like when we were doing those older records, it was like, no, we need the kick to be more present, like a larger, heftier sound. And I was into that. I wasn't going to argue with those guys at that time, but this time we kind of came in thinking, no, let's use the small kick. And if we can, let's use the snare too, because like they were all built together. I think there's a little bit of I don't know, like carryover between the tone of the snare and the rest of the drums, like cool. An organic carryover. And yeah, so we used everything on this on these last recordings, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it sounds pretty good. And I guess the other thing was that we decided to use smaller crash cymbals. And I think that's just something that I think we're going to stick with from now on. It's just, you have less riding on the crash. That's so much of the volume from where I'm sitting is just the crashing ride sections. But I think what we found was like we got to kind of like a happy middle with that stuff. I don't think we need the big roaring crash cymbals of old. Like, we seem to find like a sweet little zone with some of the options that we picked for this record. And we had a larger crash that we kind of swapped in, I think, for one or two songs, but it almost kind of felt like, I don't even think we really need it. And yeah, so I think we kind of covered all the bases with this smaller, like more consciously smaller and more sort of decisive, just play it like you feel it and mean it, with a little bit less behind it. And I think we're sort of achieving similar results. Sounds pretty good.
Nice. Okay, so I did notice that you had a slightly different gear setup at the May 21st, 2024 show. I saw a little bit of video footage and I did notice you wearing those big industrial ear coverings in the video.
Yeah.
And I did notice that the cymbals do look smaller for your
Oh
live
yeah.
setup. So I've kind of noticed that you've been kind of moving the gear around as far as like what you're choosing to play on, which is really cool. But I'm curious, just like on your reflections on that show, because it's the only show you all have done in a long time, and it was a show that you performed as a trio for probably the first time in like 18 years or something like that. So curious on your reflections on the May 2024 show in Park at Park Theater.
Yeah, it was also the I think the shortest show that we played, like going back to probably 1991. Like it was
Yeah,
pretty sure the set was a little under 20 minutes total.
yeah.
But I mean, that was one of the reasons why we were able to do that physically, that show. We knew that we didn't have time to prepare a full set. Like we were unable to do a full show. And we weren't asked to do that. We were just asked to show up for like 15 minutes and, participate with this. It was a benefit show for the International Development and Relief Foundation, which was providing emergency medical kits to, people in Gaza and occupied territories. And it's something that we felt very strongly about supporting. And with a local initiative of some people that were kind of like, hey, we feel like we really want to do something. And it was like, yeah, we talked about it and it was like, yeah, our hearts are totally into this 100%. We wanted to participate, but realized we couldn't do a full show or anything. Like it was not in our ballpark of considerations to say, hey, let's do something like this ourselves and, get a benefit show together. It was really nice to do it with, people that we hadn't worked before. It was at the Park Theater. We played with a bunch of bands that it's like a multi-genre kind of,
The lineup was cool.
different performers playing like 15, 20, 30 minutes. It had such a good vibe to it. It was, it really, really felt good. But the other side of that this was an occasion for us to kind of try out, like for me specifically, playing without in-ear monitors, which has been many, many years I've relied on those. And just to get a sense, like, can we do this? Like, how is this even going to come across playing like lighter? It was with that kit that I mentioned. And that was another thing about the show was like, with so many performers and limited changeover time in between sets, I felt like, okay, I want to play that drum kit. I don't want to play a different backline kit. I'd gotten so used to this thing and I was almost scared to get on like a larger kit. And that was kind of just part of it for me, was like, okay, if I can play these drums and offer it for everybody else to just use as the standard backline kit for the night. And thankfully everybody was really flexible. They were down with using it and didn't seem to have any issues. It's kind of a funny kit because the wooden rims, they actually sit higher on the drums than a normal flanged or die cast hoop would sit on a drum. Like they're a little bit tricky to play. You hit maybe a little more rim shots unless you're sort of aware of that physical difference. But everybody was cool with it. But I was kind of like, holy shit, this drum kit hasn't been on a stage in like 15 years. And one thing I remember about not liking about this kit was like a real bouncy kind of active, live, like heavy music stage. If there's people on stage jumping around on that stuff, the hardware's pretty lightweight on this thing and they would just bounce around. It's almost kind of like, I think I remember playing on maybe it was on a drum riser once or something, but it was just like, I'm playing a moving drum kit. Like this is extra freaking hard. And the hardware is just so finicky and a lot of things can kind of go wrong. There's so many things that you have to lock with a drum lock. Like for every stand, there's like 4 little things that you have to fasten into place. And if one of them comes undone, it could be a train wreck. And I think I remember even a tom rolling across the stage once while we were playing with this kit years ago. Just like, holy shit. And a few little pieces got lost over the years and just sort of like ramshackle, Band-Aid fixes. And I was kind of like, oh man, okay, let's use this kit. But I was just kind of hanging around, kind of like on the side of the stage, hoping that nothing was going to go haywire with it during that May 21st show. And it held up perfect. And so it seemed like a success on multiple levels. And it was, like I said, it was nice to play with some bands that we otherwise, don't really cross paths with, but we know of locally. It had a really nice vibe in the room and backstage, like the other performers. It was just a really cool thing to kind of, I don't know, like it was a gathering with purpose behind it that felt like validating and powerful. For, you get stuck in your house, in your room, and where you're not talking about these things so much with other people. And it's, I don't know, sometimes I can get pretty frustrated and pretty down on, what the, US and Canada are doing around the world in so many different cases. And with this, I just feel like, even just suggesting a ceasefire seems like some people see that as like this contentious issue. I'm just like, why? We got to get this out in the open and normalize this, the intent of this thing and start, questioning our government and, the reasons for supporting what's going over there. This sort of tacit state support without question.
Gotta kick it the darkness to the bleach day.